All right, so as I said this morning, I may have misunderstood the assignment, so if you guys are like, all right, I know all this, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you leave, but I hope not to sell myself short right out the gates, to at least teach you something, or at least reinforce something if you haven't already gone through a similar type course like this. I don't want to focus, let me see, make sure this is the right button. Don't really care about my resume that much at all, but just to give you some idea of who I am. I was the head trainer at Coinbase, and you can boo me if you would like. I understand the sins of my past, but it was cool at the time. So I've taught, I just wanted to share some of the things I've done. Again, not to self-promote, but just to give you some sense of, I've built trainings like this and delivered them to members of Congress, to professional sports organizations. I've hosted Twitter Spaces with the WNBA, taught LinkedIn, different corporations, and so I think that a lot of the stuff that we share, I've had a wide range of audiences. So I've taught a professional basketball player who I think may have been too dumb to tie his shoes, and I've talked to Congress members who are brainwashed into thinking that no matter what I have to say that it is incorrect. And so before I get started, I just want to, by a show of hands, I don't have any cool colors or anything to show you, but who is familiar with the term heuristics? All right, so most of you, does anybody want to say, venture out and say, what's that? Anybody want to give an answer of what a heuristic is?
It's like a shortcut.
Generalization. Yes. So it's a cognitive bias. All right, there's a few behavioral economists who wrote, a lot of them have written books, but Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, one of them won the Nobel Prize, and it was about heuristics. And so what I want to do is take a different angle, and like I said, this may be a bit redundant, but I think the reason that we get a lot of resistance to go along with the last session that we had is because people aren't aware of the heuristics that they already have. We have tons of heuristics. Everyone in this room uses them, whether you realize it or not. There's status quo bias, there's anchoring bias, there's all kinds of biases, there's recency bias, and you will act accordingly and think accordingly, whether you are consciously doing it or not. And so what I want to do is just kind of revisit some of the information that in my experience has been very effective in teaching people. And we've talked a lot about you can't force it down their throats. It kind of is an experience, right? The guy just said the orange pilling is like an antibiotic. It takes a couple days. So this is not to say that this is some magic formula to get people to believe in the merits of Bitcoin, but I do think that we can talk about some of those biases and just go through some of the points that I think are by far the most critical components of understanding Bitcoin that are often overlooked. I do it myself. We get into a room and we just say, you know, we're maxi, or we call it fiat, and like these people have no idea what we're talking about. And right, and it comes off sometimes very standoffish, very prideful, better holier than thou. And so I want to dumb it down, and I want to talk about, and I'll go through this quick, but just understand the historical evolution of money, identifying the structural flaws, recognizing the consequences of those policies, and then explore a solution. And I want to kind of pause and talk about heuristics as we go through it. And this is long, but I know my time. So I will similarly be happy to talk about this after the fact. But I just want to start with what is money. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, knows what money is. But my favorite definition is actually that it's a language or a technology for storing and exchanging value. So again, when we talk about heuristics, we have to challenge what you even understand as a foundation of money. How many times have you asked someone what is money, and they've said a language? That has never happened in my entire life, except for the people that I have talked to in this room, right? No one knows that it's a technology. No one understands that it's a language and a way to exchange using that. So we're all familiar with this. Again, I'll go through this quickly. But the best forms of money, we know them: store of value, medium of exchange, and a unit of account. That is what makes money good. So again, challenging the status quo bias of what makes money good money. So again, we go throughout history, we've had tons of different forms of money. Why have we settled on different forms of money? Does anyone know why we settled on gold? I'm sure you all know. Can anyone help me out, make this interactive, and give me an answer for why we use gold for thousands of years? What was the chief reason?
You were kind of fortified in nature. If you didn't embrace it, you would be left alone with something that didn't work before.
Hell yes.
It's hard to increase the supply.
Yes.
It's a shining rock.
Also great. Yes. All right, you guys are on it. So here we have the annual gold production metric in tons, and we will not, for the sake of time, we will not dig into stock to flow, but it doesn't matter what you put into producing gold, you will never produce about more than 3% of the existing supply. Why does that matter? Again, who that we talk to knows this? Not a lot of people. I have a wide range of friends, and I don't know if you saw, like I started my career at Goldman Sachs, which is worse than Coinbase, and everyone there thinks that they understand finance and thinks that they understand money, and they haven't the damnedest clue. But this concept is incredibly important. This is what separates Bitcoin from every other cryptocurrency that's existed. Right? This is why we hate XRP. This is why we hate all the other altcoins, because there is nothing like Bitcoin that has this stock to flow, and gold filled this role for thousands of years. So why didn't gold work? Oops, I got ahead of myself. Anybody want to contribute to that too? What was the chief reason that we stopped using gold primarily? Tristan?
Hard to move around, hard to carry.
Perfect. Yep. Anything else?
Security goals.
Yep.
It got centralized, and it was a lot easier to use dollars instead. So the convenience.
Perfect. So why was it easier to use dollars?
Because they can be, physical paper, but they also can be just, hey, I owe you this much. So it doesn't even need to necessarily be dollars. It could be just anything you're saying. Oh, I have this much gold, you have this much gold. Let's just trade and not settle until we need to.
Settlement, that's a key word. Again, this doesn't really have so much to do with the heuristic, but just putting a foundation of why Bitcoin is important. In banking, and everything, but in banking, when I worked in banking, there's T+1, T+2. What does that mean? You have the difference in time between a transaction taking place and when that settlement takes place. And gold made it extremely difficult to have quick or rapid transactions because it could move across time, but it couldn't move across space. Okay, so we reached a limitation. I think that where we go wrong in this a lot too is that we don't recognize that it was kind of inevitable that governments would seize control because gold had limitations. I'm very proud to say that I'm anti-government, and some of you may not be, but I generally am. However, I think there's this bias from us as Bitcoiners that this was some evil doing. This was probably well-intentioned that, hey, we can't move gold quickly, so we need to be able to seize control of the asset and use paper receipts instead to streamline transactions and cut that processing time between settlement and transactions into nothing. So again, I'm not condoning that, but we essentially traded off speed and convenience for trustlessness. All right? Again, like I said, this is, I know that we're all educators here, so I'm kind of just going on a rant. You're probably familiar with this. But I want to talk about the rise of the US dollar, something else that I think is often overlooked and incredibly important to understand. Does anybody know what meeting this is? All right, awesome. Does anybody know what state that was in? Yeah, all right, you guys are smart. I should have asked what year, but I kind of shot myself in the foot with that one. What happened at Bretton Woods?
They created a whole new world order for the dollar system around the globe using our debt to finance the building of
This guy wrote a textbook on Bretton Woods. Yeah, that's pretty. So over 44 allied nations got together and basically agreed we are going to use the US dollar as a reserve currency. And what do? We peg every currency in the world to the dollar, and the dollar is pegged to gold. Does anybody know how much the exchange rate was 1 ounce of gold was how many US dollars as a result of Bretton Woods? 35. 35. So, yeah. So essentially what happened is we said, hey, we're gonna be the reserve currency in the United States. Everyone's gonna back their money up with us. We're gonna back it with gold. You know what happens next. Well, first of all, why do we do this? The US held over 70% of the gold reserves in the world. And this also resulted in the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the World Bank. And I put a little note down here, international trade, oil, debt, and central bank reserves were all denominated in dollars, as he had pointed out. So this was very, very consequential. And again, why did this not work? So we talked about gold. Actually, let's not even jump to that next slide. Just why did this not work? Again, I think we just talked in the last session about this when we're talking with people and meeting resistance. And I'm curious, like, what are some of the points that you guys hear when you talk about with people about resistance? What do they say why they're against Bitcoin or why they haven't accepted it yet? Anything at all. There's no right answer.
It's not real, they can't hold it.
It's made up.
Has no intrinsic value.
Yes, yes,
That's from 2016.
yes,
The government won't allow it.
yes. The government won't allow, my favorite one, as we're talking about the government. All valid points. So I talked at the beginning about heuristics. One of the ones that I have had the most difficult time overcoming is the status quo heuristic. They are not used to a money that is made up, that is not physical, that is not real, that is not backed by a military. All of those things are, of course, nonsense, but it is what they have been trained to believe from being a child until their adulthood. So you have to challenge that, and I truly believe that the best way for them to overcome that is through information and truth. This is what happens. We had a gold standard that was tied to the US dollar, and it broke because, surprise, the United States overspent on social programs and war, and as a result, France was the first company, or not company, that's a hell of a company, the Frenchmen, was the first country to come out and basically say, we want our gold. We realize you do not have the dollars that are backed by gold. We want our gold back. Everybody else realizes this. They want their gold back too. Nixon has absolutely no choice. Oops, I got ahead of myself. Nixon has no choice but to disband the gold standard. And what year was that?
1971.
All right. WTF happened in 1971. Great website if you are unfamiliar with that. All right, so cruising along here. This is a part that I think we often fail to talk about as Bitcoiners, and I think is of critical importance. Again, it's very easy. I've done it myself when I was in the early days of understanding Bitcoin. I've seen my friends do it who have become evangelists to Bitcoin, that we just say, oh, Richard Nixon, what a dumbass, right? Like, can't believe that he broke from the gold standard and we should have just kept it. I don't think that there was a choice to keep using gold forever. And I don't think that Nixon really had a choice to keep pegging the US dollar to gold. So we have a natural sequence of things, right? Like this is a precursor to it. It's not to sound like religious, but it's almost like a spiritual journey for Bitcoin. These things had to happen. But the petrodollar, I never hear it talked about, and I think that it's of critical importance. So what is the petrodollar? Anybody familiar with what happened and what year this was? I kind of put the agreement here on the board, so I'm cheating, but. So, anybody, I heard something.
Saudi Arabia found all their oil, gave it back to them and said, that's fine, but you gotta pay dollars for it in the world. That's how it sells. It sells in US dollars.
I want to hand you the mic. Better at this than I am by a long shot. So, it's exactly what happened. 1974, we strike up a deal with Saudi Arabia, and why do we do that? Well, the world doesn't really trust the US dollar anymore. Everyone wants their gold back. But if we can convince everybody that they have to purchase oil in US dollars, we have a monopoly on the financial markets, right? So in exchange, we offer military protection, and Saudi Arabia basically agrees we're going to price oil in exchange for it in dollars. Now, this is a lot of words on a slide, and I'm usually against that. But I think, again, this is something that I've even had to challenge myself. I'm not here to convince you that the United States were the bad guys, but I am here to tell you that there's a lot of things that led to the growth of Bitcoin and hard money that we just often overlook that I think can be of critical importance to understanding. And I keep saying that. So what happens if the global oil is priced in dollars? Every country, whether it's trading with the United States or not, needs dollars. Countries would have to acquire dollars, and the United States basically benefits from that. I put a point down here that the US dollar became deeply embedded in the international financial system as oil's most traded commodity. Pretty good stuff, right? It's a good deal for us, at least. So why does this matter? Because you can export dollars and import real goods, which gives us a competitive advantage in the United States over every country that has ever existed. Think for a second. Does anybody have family that is, or was anybody in this room born in a country other than the United States? Where are you from?
Germany.
Germany? Nice. I'm not from, I've got German descent.
Canada.
Canada? That doesn't count. No, I'm joking. We love the Canadians despite what's all the beef, right? I'm just kidding. Well, there was one more over here, I thought, yeah.
The Netherlands.
Netherlands, awesome.
France.
France, cool. So we're represented from all over. So you guys are all from first world countries, so it's not quite as applicable, though we saw what happened with the Weimar Republic, and there are first world examples of this. But I want to think about the implications. I tend to be narrow-sighted, and I'm trying to be better about this. That like Bitcoin solves problems in the United States. If you are in Brazil and you want to open a business, how do you get a loan to take out for that business? What is the denomination of currency right now, today? It's dollars. What happens when you run that business? Are you accepting dollars? If you're running a bakery, are your customers paying you in dollars? No, they're paying you in pesos. So if they're paying you in pesos and you have a loan in dollars, what happens when the Fed decides we need to print more dollars? It absolutely handcuffs, hampers, screws, manipulates world markets on a scale that impacts way more than just what we see in the United States. And again, I want to challenge the status quo of what Bitcoin solves. But not only that, what the problem even is. So this is, we got what, 5-10 minutes? Cool, okay. So the section 5 that I think is where we spend most of the time talking about this when we're educating people, I don't really have an ask for you other than just like be cognizant of the things that we're talking about. Paint that picture for people. If you're a carpenter or a general contractor, whatever, if you're building something, you always start with the foundation, never with the roof. And the foundation of Bitcoin is these ways that people think about money, they think about history, they think about what they've been taught, and they lack truth. All right, what we're talking about is not, I feel like I'm giving a pep talk at this point, but what we're talking about is not fiction. This is all indisputable fact of what has happened, okay? So I guess that is my challenge, is to explain that. And then with that, I want to talk about what the impacts are. So we've talked a lot about history, deep dove into the petrodollar, the gold standard. Now let's talk about broad money versus base money. What is the difference? I know I have a pie chart or Venn diagram on here, but again, I like to get answers. Anybody but this guy here making me look bad. Anybody want to say the difference between base money and broad money? Do you know what it is? Close. So base money is the amount of actual dollars in the system. Broad money is all debt and dollars. So the government can increase base money, and they have many times, and I'll put a graph up here to show you. M0 is base money. I don't know why I have two M0s down there, forgive me. And M2 is broad money. And you can see this is in hundreds of billions of dollars. And you can see what happened here. It's 2008. right? The Great Recession. And down here, you can see that in 2008, it didn't go up quite as much, but it did steadily go up, and then it went a bunch up in 2020. Anybody know why the difference in 2008? Why would base money go up and broad money wouldn't go up as much? Obviously, it went up, but why would base money go up instead of broad money? All right, so you all gave great answers. So, yes, the quantitative easing is the answer to that. In I think a lot of people just throw out quantitative easing and just expect us to know what it is. QE is not money printing always. The government can change reserve ratios so that if I want to go to Tristan and he has a bank and he has to hold $1 for every 10 that I put in, but Scott is the government and changes the reserve ratio, he can loan out more. Now he only has to hold 1 for every 20 that I put in, or 30 or 40. That is broad money. It's being re-lended out over and over and over. That is the leverage that we see. That's what happened during COVID and still happens all the time. In 2008, we had an increase in base money because the government actually printed dollars to buy distressed assets from the banks, and then the banks who promised to put it back out into the economy kept it all for themselves. If you don't believe me, my Goldman orientation, the executive director said, I got a bailout and a bonus, and everybody hates me, and I don't give a damn. So she was a great lady. So, but why is this a thing? I kind of just got ahead of myself and talked about it. The Great Recession, we printed $700 billion of money. Does anybody know or want to guess what we did for the COVID stimulus? Last I saw was 5 trillion, but I will say I'm not verifying all these numbers in depth, so we'll take 2 to 40, somewhere in between there. And then one of my favorites, the war on terror. 8 trillion. This one's going to be a rough guesstimate because it's difficult to know the actual impacts. All right, we're still paying for the war on terror, not only through interest payments, but through disability, and everything that you can imagine. We're still paying for the war on terror. And 8 trillion, hit the nail on the head, $8 trillion. So again, I haven't even touched on Bitcoin at this point, but I think this is imperative for people to understand in order to truly understand Bitcoin. This is a problem. This is the problem. We cannot live in a world where this goes on forever. All right, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but Anu and I were just talking about this at lunch. We're so naive that we think, oh, we're the United States, or we're 2025, we have all this technology, we're different. No, we're not. It's actually a lot worse now than it was back in the days of Rome or the Byzantine Empire or any of the other empires, because we can create more money out of thin air whenever we want, and like a heroin addict who just keeps taking another shot is what we're doing as a government. Oh, I don't have permission to play it. Dang it. This is a video that I will just summarize for you. It's from a documentary. A member of the Federal Reserve is asked about the printing of money, and it's not going to have the same dramatic effect, but the jackass, sorry, I get a little worked up about this, talks about how he protects Americans' jobs, and that is their livelihood, and more important than anything to do with money creation. So he basically justifies printing all that money because that stimulates the economy, creates jobs, and that is Americans' most valuable asset, are his exact words. So let's talk about America's most valuable asset, their jobs. Here's paper worker of the banking industry versus everyone else since 1978. Good jobs if you're a banker. Here's the compensation of employees and index of corporate profits after tax. I'm standing in front of it, so I'll move over here. You can see the discrepancy between the two. Looks fun, again, if you are the CEO of a major corporation. March 2020 to February 2021, billionaires in the US grew their wealth by $1.3 trillion, and the top 1% gained $23 trillion in wealth since 2008, while median real wages stayed flat. This is a problem with the money. This is not a left-wing, right-wing partisan issue. This is a central bank, the Federal Reserve, who can print money and change reserve ratios on a whim. If minimum wage kept pace with productivity, it'd be around $23 an hour. Here's the years of 52 weeks at a minimum wage needed to buy a medium-priced home. If you have a home in America today, you are extremely lucky, and it's going to get worse. All right? Medium home price, pre-pandemic average mortgage payment was $1,100. In 2024, it was $2,300. It's over doubled. Just anybody might know this again, but how much money do you think was created since 2020? This includes broad and base money. Let me rephrase that. What percentage increase have we gone up in the money supply? You said 60? And what'd you say? 250? No, that's a good guess. They're both, I believe that it's 45%, although I haven't looked for like a year, so it might be closer to 60 now with everything we got going on. But again, we've been around as a nation, US dollars, for hundreds of years, and we've created almost half of all money that has existed since 1776 in 5 years. It's asinine. And what does that do? You've heard the melting ice cube metaphor. Inflation is a melting ice cube. The value of your dollar goes down less and less and less. So with that, I'm going to, 3 minutes? 2 minutes? Okay. So from a macro perspective, what does this do for businesses? It allows monopolies. A lot of people don't think about this either. It's easy when you're in tech or healthcare and you don't have to compete with exports or imports to become a monopoly. Small businesses can't compete with larger businesses. COVID pandemic hits, people running a mom and pop shop shut down, and Elon Musk makes $100 billion. What's going on there? Amazon suddenly, their PE's gone up 10x. I'm exaggerating, but it's like, what's happening here? Well, this is all the result of a faulty money system. And then last one, kind of already talked about that with the Brazil example, just emerging markets. So is Bitcoin a solution to the existing financial problems? Since I have 2 minutes, I will be very quick. Like I said, I know this is a Bitcoin conference, but I want to talk about the problem. We know the solution. This is from the Bitcoin Standard and by far my favorite explanation of Bitcoin. Bitcoin can be best understood as a distributed software that allows for the transfer of value using a currency protected from unexpected inflation without relying on trusted third parties. We all know how it works. It's more secure, it's faster, and it's more efficient. And with that, you have permissionless technology that anyone in the world can use. But all of this, as amazing as it is not as important as what we talked about at the beginning, the stock to flow. No one can create Bitcoin. No one can add Bitcoin to the supply. The supply schedule is fixed. It has the most reliable stock to flow schedule of any asset that has ever been created on the planet. And because of that, and the fact that it also serves a purpose, it will continue to not only help remedy the problem, but be the answer to the problem. It is better than gold and fiat in every single way. It will make the world a more fair place. It will make it more equitable. It will make it better for smaller businesses. It will make it better for international businesses, payments across borders, fairness, equality, justice. Everything about the world would be better if we transition back to a hard money standard. So with that, I'll end with this last slide that I pretty much already said. Bitcoin isn't here to fix the system. It is an exit ramp. That's it. If you guys want to talk to me, whatever, I'm not a self-promoter, so if you want to follow me, I'll follow you back and we can chat. I have a podcast, it's like 20 listeners. I'm happy to talk about anything. 21, yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I appreciate it. Like I said, I know that that's less education-based. I appreciate the time to at least evangelize that.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. And I'm also happy to share, I'm not going to single them out, but there are beginners to Bitcoin in this room.